You're watching a segment of The Splash, Greater West Bloomfield's news magazine show. Ronnie, over the last 14 months, we've been doing this Megacast program here on Civic Center TV and on 89.3 Lakes FM, as well as a number of our partnering stations. And it's really been a change for us in how we cover news in the local area, but it's also kind of showing that new pace of how news is being covered altogether and in general, as we are able to speak to guests in great details about information that is pertinent to them and important to them in times of crisis, and just interesting things going on in the community. In your case, Ronnie, you came into this program about halfway through our run on TV, and having had a long career already in journalism where you've been out in the trenches, you've been speaking to people, you've been holding truth to power. What attracted you coming into this program to be able to do a show like this each and every day for 2 hours, talking to people at length about important things in our community?
Well, as a reporter, when you're out in the field, Tyler, we often have these conversations, but anyone in the public, that's not what you see. You may get what we call in the business a soundbite, and a soundbite is just a snippet of that interview, which might be 10, 20 seconds long. And you've had a 20, 25 minute conversation with the individual for them to only get their message and that quick soundbite out to the public. So this is so different in the fact that we are able to have these conversations that we know other journalists are having. They're just not public. So I think that a lot of our guests appreciate it as well, because one of the things that's been so important, we are still in a pandemic, and this information is changing and changing rapidly. And so to be able to have these conversations at length with so many important people, then anyone from the general public, they can go ahead and listen in. And I think that is a huge value to them, and not just in a pandemic. I really think it's important as we go forward as well.
Yeah, it really is. And having been out in the community as a reporter for Channel 7, for Channel 2, and other markets throughout the U.S. before that, you had been talking to these people, you've been putting these stories together. And when you're out in the field in that setting, Ronnie, as a journalist, as a reporter on television or in other mediums, what is your focus going into that story, and how does in the story in that medium, and how does that translate to what we're getting additionally here doing a show like the Megacast?
Well, when you're actually, and I'm going to talk for TV, so it's different for print, we know, or for radio as well. Sure. But when you're approaching a story, it's not just about the interview and the information, but you're also so focused on the visual element. And so sometimes, your information, you have important information, but maybe you don't have a visual element to support that information, so that piece will be left out of the story. And if we heard it once, you heard it 1,000 times. Every broadcast journalist knows this. When you get back and the piece airs, and at most, sometimes you only get a minute. Sometimes you get a minute and a half. 2 minutes is almost unheard of in a TV broadcast segment. And one of the biggest things you get as you interview people, wow, that was quick. All that time that we talked, and only that small portion made it on air. Now, I will say social media is starting to change that as well. And we know that while in the typical broadcast, they can't play the entire interview, we do know that as social media has started to change over the years, some members of the media, they're becoming a little bit more social media savvy, and they are able to put the extended version of an interview maybe on their own personal Facebook page. But I guarantee it's not going to be the full interview. It may be 3 or 4 minutes or 7 minutes. It's not going to be that consistent 15, 20-minute interview, and to post it each and every day as well.
Yeah, and one of the big purposes of having news is not only to keep people informed, and of course to speak truth to power, but to lead people in a direction so that they can gather more information and make informed decisions. And especially during this pandemic, where we've had a massive information coming in from all different directions because of the technology we have access to, because of the number of people that are out reporting in various mediums. There was a lot to juggle for people throughout this pandemic, and there's still going to be situations like that going forward. So having the ability to have information from experts in the field, from people that are on the front lines of one crisis versus another, is so vital to be able to provide to people, and can really be a helpful in addition to what we can get from traditional news, getting the very basics of the story, the most important points. Do you see this as being the future of journalism beyond what we see in traditional television and radio news reporting, as we've seen the rise of podcasts and other forms of other longer forms of investigative journalism and general journalism in recent years?
I think the future of journalism is going to be very interesting, because we do know that we are losing so many investigative reporters due to various situations in the media industry, because, really you only have a few corporations that control most of the media outlets throughout the entire country. And so we do see that a lot of reporters are starting to leave the industry and trying to come up with other ways to be able to tell those stories and get that information out. Perfect example of that is Charlie LaDuff. Yeah. And, he left mainstream media, but he has found success on the platform. He uses Facebook as well as his podcast, the No BS News Hour, and he's still breaking news. He breaks news, and I will say that, a lot of the journalists will follow him and follow up on his stories because he has so many sources. But I've even seen that here with us on Civic Center TV with some of the interviews that we've done as well. You'll see some of the topics that we covered, be picked up by the mainstream media maybe that day or a day or two later as well, because that is one thing that you'll find. A lot of times as a broadcast journalist reporter, deadlines are crazy insane. So sometimes you have to be so quick with some of these interviews that you don't have time to keep the individual talking, especially with some of our politicians. And so to keep them talking, then they are able to add other nuggets to that conversation that maybe you wouldn't have had as a mainstream media person. So I do think the industry is going to be changing, and let's hope that we're going to see more of this long form talk type journalism start to develop independently, but also, other companies as well. They'll see some value in it, because I will say, I think a lot of the people that we have had on the show, they expressed their appreciation for us doing the show. And, and not just our elected leaders, not just our politicians, but also a lot of the business owners throughout this pandemic. One of the goals was, how are they surviving? What are they up against? And also maybe helping out another business, because they were able to share some of the, tricks and tips that they've changed throughout the pandemic that's helped them along. So it's really about bringing the community together. And, let's hope that coming out of the post COVID-19 craziness, if we ever get there, Tyler, that some of this sense of community and long form journalism sticks around.
So as we go forward and as journalism goes forward, I'm just some TV and radio producer guy. I'm not a journalist, but being able to see the impact that a show like this has had on regular people in the community, on informing people in the community. It does cover what really are the pillars of the noble profession of journalism, which is to be able to provide important information to the public, to speak truth to power, and one of the more important ones, or most important, I would say, at least from what I have experienced doing this show, is providing voice to the voiceless and letting people know about how it really does, how something like this crisis really does impact people who are working on the front lines, people who are running businesses, small businesses, and keeping our neighbors, our friends, our family employed, and being able to tell their stories in detail so that people really understand the human element of the pandemic, but more importantly, in a general sense, the human impact of the news. Ronnie, anything else that we haven't touched on that you would like to say about what we've been doing here at the Oakland County Megacast and why something like this may be important to the community?
I just really hope that it continues and having the conversation continues as well. I think, again, like you said, Tyler, it's been so important for the people that live here. I just think about like the schools, right? The changes in the schools. And we've been able to definitely reach out in depth to so many of the superintendents. And it's vital information. And as we all emerge from this pandemic, we have to remember there's going to be a lot of changes going forward. And so let's hope the show continues as well.
Absolutely. And you can join Ronnie and I each and every day, Monday through Friday, live, 10 a.m. to 12 noon, right here on the Oakland County Megacast. So as you enjoy what's going on around Orchard Lake, Sylvan Lake, Kego Harbor, and of course, West Bloomfield on the Splash each and every Tuesday, you can join Ronnie and I in the mornings for more details and more of that important information as we continue to bring you news on the COVID-19 pandemic and so much more in the greater Oakland County area. Thanks for watching this segment of The Splash. To watch the entire show or other segments, catch us on Comcast Channel 15 and AT&T Channel 99. Or look us up online at thesplash.tv and listen to us every week on 89.3 WBLD, the all-new Lakes FM.